Keep your voice low and your footsteps lighter still, because names like hers have a way of coming back when spoken aloud. As shadows lengthen and chill winds creep, a familiar figure emerges from the dark depths of pop culture. Wednesday Addams, the Dark Princess of Halloween, returns for a night of mystery and macabre. I remember the first time her silhouette slid across my screen like a stray eclipse, and the room lost a few degrees. Was it nostalgia or an omen when that cello scraped out a melody that seemed to know my house by heart? Night pressed at the windows, a draft tasted of iron and old wood, and somewhere a door settled with a patient sigh. I'd been warned, of course. I didn't listen. I watched, and I learned. We saw her first not in motion, but ink. Charles Addams drew her with a pin's precision and a mortician's humor, those early New Yorker panels shivering with domestic doom. The walls looked too close and the furniture slightly overfed, while the little girl in the strict dress held a deadly calm, as if she'd been born knowing the color of shadows. In 1964, television gave her a name pulled from an old rhyme, Wednesday's Child, full of woe, and the set lights warmed nothing. Black and white glow washed her braids into dark ropes, and even the laugh track sounded nervous around the edges. America, that sprawling theater of cheerfulness, recognized a different kind of mirror in those rooms. Time marched in cracked patent shoes. The films of the early 90s lacquered her with gothic shine, a guillotine humor sharpened by Christina Ricci's deadpan blade. Years later, the Broadway stage let her sing under chandeliers that swung like pendulums. Then came the streaming century, blue light licking living rooms, and Jenna Ortega's Wednesday stalked hallways with a metronome heart and a storm of unblinking stares. Algorithms could measure engagement, but not the prickle at the base of the skull when she danced in that antique dress, a moth celebrating its own night. We watched her cross decades as if stepping stone to stone in a graveyard, and each landing sounded true. The nation engraved its fascination on pumpkin skins and lunchboxes, a bright consumer's grin barely veiling the tremor that drew us closer. We followed the trail of houses because stories hide in timber and stone. It began on American sidewalks in Westfield, New Jersey, where Charles Addams spent boyhood days sketching porches that leaned and mantles that sulked. The air there held a suburban hush, manicured hedges masking older whispers. People still recall the grim cases that stained those streets, letters from an unseen watcher, a family vanished behind prudence and prayer, modern folklore that clung to siding like mildew. You could stand before a cheerful facade and hear, under the sprinkler hiss and summer cicadas, the quiet punctuation of history tapping on the pipes. Her invented home, that museum of oddities, felt less like fantasy and more like an honest inventory of disquiet. Screens later borrowed their own bones.
The television exterior was said to nod to an old Los Angeles property, the kind of place where palm trees wheeze and stucco cracks like a smile. The 1990s films roosted in Californian mansions, whose ballrooms tasted of dust and perfume. The Paramore estate carried rumors of waltzing specters, showgirls who never left the party. Then the Netflix series moved across the ocean to Romania. Going there, I felt the Carpathians breathing slowly under snow.
Cantacuzino Castle reared from the mountainside, its stone damp to the touch, iron gates etched with weather. Cold threaded the corridors, the kind that slips into coat linings and clings to ribs. Locals told us about footsteps that crossed landings when no tour ran, a soldier glimpsed on the ramparts, and a portrait whose eyes found you even after you bowed. The town set, built outside Bucharest, kept its clapboard smile. At night, frost climbed the facades while stray dogs padded past, their nails skittering on plywood streets. Every camera angle had a draft, every staircase groaned in a dialect of centuries. The estate on paper had always felt inevitable. Walking beneath those vaults, it felt earned. Clothes can be armor, and hers clanged without making a sound. The uniform of Nevermore, monochrome stripes and a somber tie, rubbed shoulders with Victorian mourning. A mother might run a thumb across a collar and think of a keepsake locket clutched beneath black crepe. A teenager might knot a tie too tight and feel rebellion lean close. Velvet drank light. Patent leather flashed like a blade. A silver brooch shaped like a spider sat clean as punctuation at the throat. In thrift stores across the country, Hangers skittered on metal racks as seekers hunted for precise geometry. A crisp white collar, a dress with a narrow storm of pleats, a cardigan with a secret weight. Fabric carried history, jet beads from somebody's widowhood, lace edging that smelled faintly of cedar and attic rain. By autumn, shop windows cooled into chapel glass. In New Orleans, mannequins with parasols and widow's weeds. In Portland, thrift alchemists mending moth-bitten wool with visible stitchwork. In Detroit, leather trenches brooded down the line with chains that clinked like a quiet courtroom. Ribbons threaded braids, safety pins bit cuffs, boots were polished to an accusatory sheen. Makeup counters leaned gray, foundations pale and matte, shadow shades of ash and bruise, a mouth colored like freshly bitten berries. The look didn't shout, it listened. People layered intellect on menace, campus tweed over punk hardware, a library smell moving under club lights. Corporate Halloween rushed to package the mood, but the most convincing outfits were handmade in kitchens at 2 a.m., scissors whispering through fabric while rain stung window screens. In the mirror, 1,000 Wednesdays tried on themselves and found a posture they didn't know they'd been missing, shoulders squared as if ready to walk a corridor nobody else noticed. Midnight moved differently that year. We felt it approach along the gutters and over the roofs, bringing a promise like a folded note. Fans traded theories in comment threads and back booths. The Academy's hallways had more doors than maps showed. The town's pilgrim history wasn't finished talking. The family vault, her family vault, might be closer to the surface than anyone thought. She had a way of leaning toward secrets the way sunflowers lean toward the sun, except her light was older, colder. We paged through clues. A music box with a tune that paused over an unplayed note, a mosaic that rearranged itself when you looked sideways, a book bound in the wrong skin. The Nightshade Society hadn't exhausted its roots. Neither had the past. What door would she press next Halloween? There were whispers about a ledger kept under the floorboards of Jericho's oldest house, ink that bled through paper and spelled names that never had paid for what they'd done. A map scratched on the underside of a school desk could arc toward catacombs washed by a hidden spring. Maybe a silver key had been hiding in plain sight, welded into a crematorium ornament, warm when the rest of the world chilled. I pictured chandeliers flickering under hurricane glass, a classroom globe spun to an unmarked land, and in her pocket a letter that smelled faintly of funeral lilies. The path already tugged at her heels. Whatever she opened would not be the end of anything. It would be an intersection, and those are where people forget what they promised themselves. If you follow, keep one hand on the banister and the other on your pulse. She taught us that even as we learned it too late, we had invited her into our homes with a click, as if that meant we could make her leave just as easily. Yet she lingered, on mantels in framed stills, in playlists haunted by creaking strings, in clothes that hung waiting for October to slide onto shoulders again. Long after the credits rolled, the house carried her weight in its quiet places. A cold patch beside the bookshelf, a mirror that rippled once and then settled into obedience. Every year the pumpkins ripen, every year the night rehearses its entrance. We knew she would return because Halloween is less a date than a pressure system, and she has always read the weather. Close the window a little tighter this time. Blow out the candle before it drinks your breath. You already saw how easily she walked through.